Welcome to the Peace Over Pieces podcast, hosted by Clara Baldwin. Peace Over Pieces is a nonprofit domestic violence organization creating podcasts with victims while providing donations, hotline information, and resources. If you or anyone you know is in need of financial or emotional assistance related to domestic abuse, please visit our website for contact information. Now, without further ado, please enjoy the next episode.
Hello everyone, my name is Lauren, and I'm telling you all my story today in hopes that it can inspire others to speak out, heal myself, and help others. I will be telling my life story and how it leads up to my abuse incident. This is not an easy story for me to tell, and honestly I was hesitant. It involves someone who has passed and some who are still alive that may feel a certain way about me telling my truth and my experience. With that, I'll jump right to it. My life growing up was, I like to think, a very interesting one. My dad worked for Turner Broadcasting, and he was promoting wrestlers. And my mom was a full-time working mom, but, still tried to make time all the time to put food on the table, take care of my brother and I. My dad traveled a good bit with his job. And also in our early childhood, my brother and I were modeling and acting. We were actually both the kids on I'm pretty sure it was 98 or 96 Coca-Cola commercial in Atlanta, amongst a few other things that were, again, very interesting and random to know about me. But with all that crazy excitingness, behind closed doors was an interesting story as well. I love both my parents. I want to say that first and foremost. My father has now passed since 2017. So there's been a lot that I've gone through with dealing with that alone. But when I was a child, unfortunately, my father did have alcoholism. I didn't notice it as much when I was little, except for the fact that, we would go to the liquor store and there was a drive-through at the time. Those don't really exist except for in Louisiana really now. But he would get, a whole bunch of beers and get me a lollipop. So early on as a kid, you don't really pick up on that thinking, it's a bad thing because, people drink. Drinking is fine. And so I was also being schmoozed with a little bit of a lollipop and didn't think anything of it until I started witnessing a lot of fighting, and it was daunting as a kid. I don't remember as much of what was said, but all I remember is that it was pretty traumatizing. The level of fighting that both my parents were doing, the anger that could come out randomly in my father, even though he was normally the most caring and sweet and understanding man, it changed him at times. And my mom, with dealing with that, struggled with her own emotions. She was trying to process it herself. And so sometimes, unfortunately, it got taken out on me. And I used to even read the Bible to my parents. There was a time in my life that I was pretty religious, thinking that it could save them in the relationship. Because when you're that age, you at first don't try to tell your parents to get divorced. You're like, oh, you can love again. You obviously had us. You got married. You can love again. But one day it hit ahead. It got pretty bad. And there was one day my brother and I were just sitting in the basement and my mom comes down hysterical. We heard a little bit of something, but we weren't sure what was really going on. And if my memory serves me correctly, she said that he had threatened her, which is not something that we remember him ever doing. They fought, but we never remember him ever threatening to hurt her or, beyond hurt her. And she was so scared that she wanted to call the cops, and she did. And she was very concerned. He had left the house. So apparently they had a fight upstairs in our kitchen and he had left the house, and she called the cops. And here I am, only 12, 13, maybe 14 years old. This was middle school, coming upstairs to watch my father get arrested. And mind you, this is hard for me to even say this without crying. That was traumatizing within itself as well. I loved my father. he wasn't perfect, but I knew that he had his demons. And yet in that moment, after that, I became angry, very angry, because at that same time, I was losing my faith and from seeing all the fighting and all that. And then getting into a different kind of group of friends in middle school that maybe weren't the best. And also having guys in school that started to harass me. I was being sexually harassed to the point where my parents had to come to school and get involved with the principal, and these boys ended up getting OSS. You would think that that would have taught them a lesson at first or made them feel a certain way. Well, they definitely felt a certain way, because when they came back from that, I was bullied. I was bullied by girls and guys for a moment. I'm not going to go down the whole wormhole of like what really all happened at that time, but it was bullying, harassment, and yet my home life was falling apart. It was really the hardest time of my life, other than what I just have gone through in my incident, which I'm leading up to that. So as all this is happening, my parents are slowly but surely like thought they could maybe work it out and getting separated. And my mom at that point, was getting fed up. She loved my father, still loves my father. They remained friends actually after the divorce, but before the divorce happened, it was not pretty. There was he said, she said, as while I'm going into high school, and it was tough. It was tough because I was fighting with my mom because I wanted her to get divorced from my dad, because I wanted her to live a better life. But at the same time, we were butting heads because I felt like I was also like being her friend at such an early age, but I also felt like I was hearing too much, baby. And then after my parents got divorced, I felt like my mom moved on a little bit quickly and got into another bad relationship, unfortunately, that resulted in abuse. Abuse that I'm not going to go into all the details because that's my mom's story to tell, but it wasn't good. I still do not like to have hate in my heart for anyone, but if I was to ever see this man on the street, I would have a hard time. What he did was not okay. And to witness that at only 18 years old, I was devastated. I kept being like, why can't my mom be strong? Why can't my mom date the right people, be with the right people? And here I am in my story. But I eventually saw her date other people, and some of it good, some of it bad. At that point, I became what I called myself the pit bull of the family. I was very outspoken. I was trying to come off very tough. I think I was trying to put on this tough exterior because there was so much pain that was inside of what I had dealt with in my adolescent years and leading up to that. And then I went on to have relationships with guys that some were good and some were bad. I had a friend take advantage of me at the age of 20, and he was in denial about it and told all our friends that didn't happen the way that I said that it happened. And so we all decided to hang out again. And that's when I knew the truth, because he tried again. And at that time, cops became involved, and he threatened my life and my family's if I putting out that what he did happened. Now let's go to the incident. Let's fast forward. So I have been dating someone that I had known for a little while, and we met on a dating app. I'm not going to name the dating app just in case, but we dated for on and off a year. So that's just the beginning, or a little bit of the backstory. I'm sorry. And the funny thing is, I was not running to meet this guy at first. I was in my own little world. I had gotten out of a relationship before him that ended up toxic, but the person I felt at the time was the love of my life, I thought. But it was more of a gaslighting relationship. And then I get into this one where there's a little bit of that too, but a lot more narcissistic. tendencies. So we meet. The first date, honestly, was really kind of sweet. I showed up as myself. And when I say I show up as myself, I wore skinny jeans, black boots, black shirt, and just like basic makeup. And I was like, this is me, take it or leave it. You know, that's really kind of been my attitude more as I've gotten older. And apparently he was feeling it. He was just getting off a mini tour that he went on. Mind you, this is COVID times, but not shut down COVID, but like coming out of it kind of. And so we met at one of my favorite coffee shops and we had a great time talking. It was kind of cool, but I kind of thought he was a little bit interesting. I'll put it that way. My first impression was like, I wasn't 100% interested in this guy, but I liked spending time with him. I just did not know how I felt, and kind of realizing that should be a sign for us all. If you're like enjoying the person's company to a certain extent, but you're not, there's something that you're like, I don't know about this guy from the get-go, maybe that's something to pay attention to. However, I thought it was really sweet that, you know, he walked around, went to my favorite little like horror shop with me, and he's not that big into that stuff. Like he liked horror movies, don't get me wrong. That was a definite part in our relationship where we'd watch a lot of good 80s horror films, but he wanted to continue hanging out with me that day. Like we went from a date that was probably supposed to be 30 minutes to an hour to spending a few hours together, like ended up having lunch and everything. At that time, he was actually trying to not be narcissistic and brag about himself and his accolades. He had quite a bit. I didn't even know his last name at first, but that's probably good. You know, dating apps, you know, give people a little bit of privacy. And from then on, he did pursue a little bit. He wanted to hang out and, you know, eventually take me to Joshua Tree, which fast forward, that is where the incident ended up happening. And overall, like I had a good time with him. Like we would talk for a long time. The beginning of the relationship seemed fine. But as like time progressed, after 2 months, I started to see him get a little agitated by weird things. We were at a coffee shop that, mind you, I did recommend to go check out. And he got upset with me for not paying. Now, this is definitely a debate in relationships all over nowadays. Like, who pays? Where do you draw the line? Well, I had come from many relationships where I've never had a guy ask me to pay for the dinner, the coffee, nothing. So at that time, I was like, this is new to me. I'm an open-minded person. I don't really mind, you know, paying for a coffee or paying for a lunch, you know, but it just, the way he went about it was so weird. We were checking out and I was like kind of dealing with something at the time, and I don't remember what it was 100%, but it was enough to distract me. And he tried to, I think he claims he told me what kind of coffee he wanted a couple of times. Like he wanted me to even order it for him, went over my head. And so when we get up there and order and like, then the person's like waiting for us to pay and I'm kind of like oblivious. And he's like, okay, I'll pay. Like kind of makes a scene to a certain extent. We start walking away and he makes a comment. He's like, well, would have been nice if you paid or something like that. And we're like around people. And so I just kind of like looked at him. This is how I was also raised. Like I told you about my parents and how that stuff happened. None of that ever happened in public. And so I was raised to believe like you can do whatever you want behind closed doors, but don't make a scene in public. It's kind of in short of what I'm trying to say is like, that's just not, I don't believe in public disturbances per se. And I kind of looked at him and I was like, we're not going to discuss this right now in front of all these people. And so we go outside. He says his piece, you know, about the whole debacle. And I just try to explain like, hey, you know, I'm not used to that. I will try to meet you in the middle. I'll try to compromise. But I said, you have to as well if you want this relationship to succeed. You know, we can't just, it can't be my way or the highway. And like, he was kind of coming off like that. And I was like, well, I like you. I want to continue to see you, but you can't just expect somebody coming from a totally different dating style to completely conform to yours. But I did my best. However, from then on, we proceeded to continue to date, but there was just so much stress about money. Like every time I'd go out, I never knew when I needed to throw down my card or not. It started to give me anxiety. I really started to get so much anxiety. And some people would think that's crazy that I'm getting anxiety over that. But like, if you could have been there and been in my shoes, like you would understand, like it was just, I felt like I was walking on eggshells. And yet to him, he felt like he would try to use those words against me and say like, no, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells with you. Yet all I would ever try to do is communicate feelings. Like if I was not feeling good about something or something made me uneasy, and it would turn into a fight with him. And I would, in the end up crying, feeling like I did something wrong. Like it would always get turned around on me. This is early signs that I wish I held on to and ran. It got really bad that Christmas when I ended up with COVID. I was really depressed. Holidays have never been an easy time for me since my father's passed. Like his birthday was in November. That's been an unlucky month for me. And it was hard. I didn't expect to be sick, but it happened. And all I wanted was for him to really be there for me. And it just kept turning into arguments. I had more friends do more for me during that time than he did. I felt like I was having to teach him to be there for me when I was sick. Yet, fast forward, there was a time where he was sick and I put myself at risk, and I ended up getting a little bit sick afterwards, claimed he didn't have COVID, tested he didn't have COVID, and yet nursed him to good health. And I ended up being sick for like 2 days after that. That was fast forward. But coming back, the COVID situation was so bad. We were fighting and really just wanted him to be there. He had his excuses. He had his reasons. And eventually I just started growing tired from like the anxiety and just feeling like I was, alone and we were fighting too much. And I tried to break up with him before New Year's. And I was like, hey, I think we're fighting too much. This is just too much. And he was like, he ended up going to Joshua Tree without me. He was actually going to take the chance and have me go with him. That was his thing, to want to go in the holidays that year, to spend time out there. And he went without me, even though I tested negative. He was like, I think you still sound sick. It's just like his weird behaviors. It's like I can understand being protective, but I was like negative. I was fine. And yet he was like, went without me. It was little things like that that just kept hurting my feelings, which some people would think nothing of it. But it was just all these things wrapping up into one. And after he came back from Joshua Tree, we were like talking, and I went over to his house. He convinced me that he was wanting to work things out. So I cooked him dinner and everything seemed fine. And, we ended up actually hooking up. And yet days later, I find out that I have to get a procedure done. I had a fibrinoma in my chest. And I, again, did not feel like he was there for me. Anytime there was a medical disturbance going on with me and my body, he would just shut down. He was not very sympathetic or empathetic. He really lacked a lot of empathy for others in general, not just me. And ended up breaking up because I called him out on it. I was like, you're acting weird. We ended up breaking up, and I was devastated because I was like, here I was going through this hard time, and I thought he was trying to work things out. We were, he made me feel again that it was like he was the one willing to work things out and smooth things over and stop fighting, but it was me. Like somehow it just made me feel like it was always me. So we break up. We break up for a while. We didn't talk for a month or two, and then slowly started talking, trying to be a little bit friends, or so I thought. I wanted to just maybe be friends with him because, like I said before, I did enjoy his company, but there was definitely something off. Well, eventually we get back together because he convinced me, no, I always did want it to work out and da-da-da. And we get back together, and it seemed like he was better with his communication because he did lack good communication on the first half of when we were together. And then going into the second time of being together, getting back, he really seemed to listen, or so I thought. Things seemed better, but I've now learned with people that are narcissistic or just people like him in general, they will always put their best foot forward to get what they want at first. And then everything starts to fall apart eventually, because maybe it's a heavy weight for them, or that's just how things go with people. You can only pretend to be something you're not for a while. Well, eventually that facade started to fade. All these super nice things he was doing for me, making breakfast, bringing me coffee, seemingly like take care of me and my dog, and like taking me to all these adventures. There was the occasional fights that did start to eventually happen, or disagreements. But again, it seemed better this time. Well, let's fast forward to 2022, December, where he wanted to go spend the holidays in Joshua Tree. And when we were in Joshua Tree, we never fought. Something about that area was just zen for us in the relationship. So much so that we were there for a couple days, and I was even commenting, I was like, us being here, like, we haven't had one fight. Everything seems fine. And even he was like, yeah, we're in a good place. We're in a good place. Little did I know a few days later that it was going to become an absolute nightmare. And New Year's Eve hits. We had already spent Christmas together. It was beautiful. It felt great. Things seemed to be progressing, or so I thought. And that night, he was like hell-bent on wanting to have a good time. And honestly, I was like, well, we got to go back in a day or two. I wasn't really trying to go all out. I wanted to have a good time, but not get crazy. We were supposed to hang out with his contractors and just, spend the New Year's back at the property that he owned. And we were at a restaurant having dinner, and we'd had one or two drinks. And it seemed like it was going fine. He was talking about the future, traditions, and all that. But mind you, he had talked to his father, who he had had a very broken relationship for some years. And he said it was a good call, but in hindsight, I'm now like thinking, was that really a good call? And he wanted to keep going out. And I said, well, we can go to this other bar up the road. We couldn't decide what we wanted to do because his contractors ended up having to bail. And we go there, and again, seems like a good time. Well, we end up leaving, and on our way back, he starts to become a totally different person, like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Like, I allegedly missed a turn, and he started to yell at me so badly, like, to right then and there, I was like, I'm not going to be with this person anymore. It was so bad. He was like calling me an idiot. He was just really just laying into me, like in a way that like I've just never seen or experienced with him. I admitted we had disagreements, but this was a whole nother side to him. And I had only witnessed him drinking heavily, but I didn't witness anything else. We proceed to almost get back to the house, but I couldn't take the yelling. I couldn't take the verbal abuse anymore. And I said, you can get out of the car if you're going to talk to me like that. And eventually he's like, yeah, sure, I got to pee anyways, kind of like attitude. And he gets out of the car, and I decided to give him a taste of his own medicine. And I drove off a little bit and wanted to turn back around. And when I turned back around, he wasn't there. And I was like calling his phone, texting his phone, trying to find him. I was freaking out. I started calling his friends, even my friends, like, what do I do? He ends up calling me at one point, cussing me out, and I kept just staying calm at that time. Something in me was like, just stay calm. And he hangs up on me, wouldn't tell me where he was. I get back to the house after circling it 4 times, it felt like. And I'm sitting there in the driveway like, what is going on? What has happened? And he eventually walks up to my driver's side door and eerily like knocks on it. And I almost had a heart attack right then and there. And I get out of the car and I'm like, where were you? Where have you been? And he doesn't say a word. And then we are walking in to the house, and that's when the door closed and this devil of a person came out. He was screaming at me, saying, you left me for dead. How could you? How could you? This is absolutely over. All the while he's trying to pour a bottle of champagne and pass me a glass. And I said, absolutely not. I was not drinking at that point anymore. I was just over the night already. And he keeps yelling. And saying horrible things to the point where I actually ended up recording him because I was like in the middle of nowhere in the desert. There's homes around, but they're not that close. And I was getting very, very scared of him. This was a side, like I said again, that I will say again, that I'd never seen in him. And I just was like, I'm going to go to bed. I'm going to sleep on the couch. Like, this is just not happening. I was like, I'm going to leave in the morning. I was the one who drove, by the way. It was my car and only my car there. And eventually he starts losing it in a different way where he's like, I'm just going to drive us home. After, mind you, he's had way too much to drink. And I said, you are absolutely not driving home. And I look over and my keys are gone. He starts proceeding to throw my stuff in the middle of the living room everywhere. My dog is freaked out. She actually ends up getting out at one point, and I thought I lost her, with the coyotes and everything out in the desert. He just proceeds to keep getting worse. He starts even threatening me, and telling me the different ways that he was going to kill me and where he was going to bury my body. I was in such shock that I didn't even lose it then. I was trying to comprehend what was going on. I was like, how is this man who I just told him days prior that I love him, telling me the ways he was going to kill me and dispose of my body and bury it? And all this crazy stuff and just throwing my stuff everywhere. I ended up calling the cops on him because I was like, you're absolutely not driving my car and I want to know where my keys are. Cops come. I did not tell them at the time that he had threatened me because I had already had trauma from cops, as you know, from my middle school years, seeing someone that I loved get arrested then. I just told him, I said, can you please try and get my keys and can you please convince him to calm down and not try and drive? Well, once they left, it got worse. And I was really getting scared. Mind you, I'm still recording various voice recordings of him because I felt like if I'm going to be killed and if I'm going to die, I want people to know how this went down. And I'm on the phone with my friend Brandon because at that point I was like, I'm getting on the phone with someone so they can hear this. I'm not crazy. This is what's happening. And I told him, I was like, can you please tell him that I was trying to find him? I was just doing anything to just plead and calm him down. Little did I know that was going to set him off worse. And all I know is after my friend Brandon had told him, dude, you need to calm down. She cared about you. She did try to find you, blah, blah, blah. He grabs the phone out of my hand and throws it onto the ground, takes my glasses, takes them off, throws them to the ground. And all I remember is him having my hands and my head. He goes from my hands to my head and I'm laying on the ground and he's just pulling chunks of my hair out and hitting my head to the floor and saying, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. And all the while I'm looking at him saying, why are you doing this? For what felt like a few minutes, could have been a minute. I was just pleading with him, why are you doing this? And eventually fight or flight kicks in and I start to fight back. I was like, I'm going to pull this guy down. I remembered my dad with the whole wrestling. He had taught me a few things. And I just was like, well, maybe if I do this, I can get him on the ground and get away, And I think he noticed with me fighting back that he was like, oh, she's not going to let me do this easily. And I grabbed my glasses, I grabbed my phone, and all the while, he's grabbing a hammer at this point and chasing me out the door, and I'm grabbing his arm to try and make sure he does not hit me. And I get pushed out the door, left in the cold. I call my friend Brandon back, and my friend Brandon saved my life. I wasn't meaning to give many names, but I feel like he deserves that accolade that when he was hearing the attack go down, he called the cops immediately and said that he had weapons. He heard everything. And they eventually ended up showing up. But all the while I was even on the phone, he showed up at the door at one point with a gun in his hand and was like, if you don't get away from this door, I don't even want to remember what else he said. But all I know is my friend Brandon did hear it. And I was banging on the door because it was freezing outside and I wanted my keys, so at least to sit in my car. And then eventually the cops showed up and they're in SUVs and I'm already so freaked out by everything. And I hear a shotgun go, ch-ch. And that sound alone was like, ah. And they were like, ma'am, come to the car. And I'm like, absolutely not with those guns, you know? And eventually I did go to the car. I saw that they put the guns down and they were just trying to do the right thing and keep me warm. And then again, I watched the person that I thought I loved. They were able to get my keys from him, and I was able to go back in the house, gather my thoughts, get my things, all the while my dog was gone. And ironically, right when I was about to give up hope about my dog, she shows up walking around the corner or the street, you know, from the house, and just my little French bulldog just, oh, hey there. Like, I was just having a mini vacation kind of attitude. And that's something now that I have to laugh and smile about, because this little, maybe at most 28-pound little French bulldog survived a couple hours or so in the desert by herself, full of coyotes, because we saw coyotes days before. And I drove home with the worst headache and crying and scratches on my face and not really understanding what all went down, but then trying to comprehend it and put the pieces together. But ever since this incident, I have, for the first few months of this year, I struggled with depression. I struggled with anxiety worse than you could ever imagine. I had to take supplements every night to sleep for what felt like 2 or 3 months. And even sometimes stuff during the day just to kind of get through the day. I've had to do therapy. I've really had to hold my friendships very close to me. You know, just so grateful for my friends during this time. And, you know, family, I did not want to tell them right away. I had recently only told some of them. And now if they hear this story, I think it's not going to be easy to hear. But after months of getting through the hardest parts of what I felt and dealing with also health issues on top of it all, I've come to a better place now where I want to be an advocate for people. I don't want this cycle to continue in my life. I eventually want to have kid or kids, and I don't want them to go through what I've gone through. So with me telling this story now, I want people to know that it's okay not to be okay, but to do the work. And it's also okay to speak up. Be honest, be vulnerable. You never know who could hear your story and who it could help. And that's why I'm doing this. And I plan to do so much more as being an advocate for other survivors and the ones who haven't survived. This has made me strong in a sense of where I feel like I set healthy boundaries for myself and others now. I cherish every person that is in my life and give them the time of day that they need when they're also going through something. Because we all need a friendship, like community, a group. We all need to be close to our family. We all need even time alone to process, to heal. I highly recommend therapy. So with closing this out, I want you to know that I'm not saying all of this to please pity me. No, please don't. If anything, I hope that it's inspiring to know that regardless of everything that I've gone through, I still have hope. I still want to one day find love. I want to one day be able to trust somebody. Again, that is something that I have struggled with as of late, but I do hope that this story helps somebody. And I want to thank the lady who reached out for the opportunity to be on this podcast. So here's to the men and women that have gone through these trials and tribulations in life. And here's to growing with strength, empathy, and so much more.